Hi everybody, welcome back to part 3 of my top 200 favorite video games of all time. We are down to the top 50, the cream of the crop really, 50 through 26 today. And starting off with number 50, Tales of Legendia on the PS2. And I have such mixed feelings about this game because there are aspects of this game that are in my top 2 of the series. There are aspects of it that are actually my favorite in the series, and then there are bits and pieces of it that I just really do not like. And I did a full review of this game at one point, so check that out if you want to hear a long description of why I have those feelings about this game. But Tales of Legendia, visually, I absolutely adore aspects of it, but parts I do not. Sort of the old style of these sort of chibi-esque characters and the way much of the world and the dungeons are designed, I have a bit mixed feelings on. Not quite the best, but I really like the color palette used in this. I like a lot of the crystalline blues and the dark blue on pale white. There's lots of different great color combinations, and artistically I think many aspects of it are absolutely beautiful, but some of the design choices as far as the character models and things like that aren't quite as great and as beautiful as some of the environments or some of the animated cutscenes. It's a little bit of a mixed bag in that department. Gameplay-wise, it's the same thing. You only have one real town, and everything feels somewhat claustrophobic as you're going throughout the world. It just doesn't feel as expansive and as interesting of a world to explore as in many other Tales games, but at the same time I really actually appreciate and like sort of the older style combat system that feels it's a step back from where the series evolved gameplay-wise. In Tales of Symphonia, it feels more like some of the older 2D ones like Eternia and Destiny and that kind of stuff. I kind of like that. So it's a bit of a give and take there, but there are a couple aspects of it that are just absolutely gorgeous. I really love the story overall. It's not quite the best in the series, but it's enough to where I got involved in it. But the main thing is the characters. This is my second favorite cast of characters in a Tales game. I really just felt for these characters. Chloe, Sentinel Coolidge, like everyone in this cast really drew me in and made me enjoy the overall plot far more than I think I would have if I wasn't so invested in the actual characters. There's also a ton of content in here when you get to the sort of false ending and the post-game content. It just kind of keeps going. There's so much here to enjoy. There are just a few missteps in design, and then you can't mention this game without talking about the amazing score. Overall, this is without question my favorite soundtrack to any Tales game. It's one of my favorite soundtracks for games in general. Absolutely beautiful. So it's a great cast of characters, a wonderful score, and a bit mixed on the visual side. It's just that actually playing through the game has a bit of a mixed experience. So overall, I really love this game, though. When it comes down to it, when you put it all together, some of its parts, I think my enjoyment of the game and my love for the game is far beyond the actual, just general objective quality of the overall package. One slot higher than that is another Tales game, number 49, Tales of Symphonia on the GameCube, one of the very few GameCube RPGs out there. Eventually it was ported to the PlayStation 2 Japan only, but I've only played the GameCube version, and this seems to be one of the better version overall. So I've absolutely fell in love with this because when I had my GameCube, I didn't have very many games back when the system was current, and this is one of the few that I had, and it was one of the few that was exclusive in my region. It was one of the few that was an RPG, so it really stood out for me, and I loved the upgrade to the battle system. I love the way things changed from I'd played some of the Tales games on PS1. I really like the evolution of the series at this step. I absolutely love the art style. I think it's one of the best looking games in the series, even to date. I just really like the way things look here, the somewhat cel-shaded look here. I like the character designs, and I probably had more fun exploring the world / two worlds kind of in Tales of Symphonia than almost any other Tales game. I love the puzzles, probably my favorite puzzles in that series. If maybe give it up a little bit more to the Abyss with puzzles, kind of back and forth, but overall I think this is just an absolute joy to play. I think some elements of it story-wise were a little too cliched, but overall just I found this to be such a remarkably enjoyable RPG that I've come back to time and time again. Number 48. Oh man, this is such a missed opportunity. Advent Rising on the original Xbox. This is on original Xbox and PC. And this, I like to say, is kind of Mass Effect before Mass Effect, but it was a failed attempt. You have a an amazing science fiction story that the script was penned by Orson Scott Card, a great science fiction writer. Overall, everything about this from a story and character perspective, I absolutely loved. This is one of my top 3 soundtracks to any video game ever. It's so much from the immersion and storytelling perspective of this game is absolute genius. It's incredible, and I really wish we got the rest of the series. It does end on a sort of cliffhanger. It was supposed to continue on and be a trilogy, and it bombed, and a lot of it comes from some of the technical issues here. You also had issues with the company's Majesco kind of running out of money and having this, play to win $1 million that didn't really pan out because then they weren't going to pay the winner, and all this other controversy happened with the game, and it got very low scores because this is unbelievably buggy, both on PC and the original Xbox. Both versions, there's so many issues. I mean, I've had the Xbox crash on me and things like that. I've had the sound completely cut out and you're just playing with just the sound effects, but the music is gone and that type of thing. There have been so many issues when you play this game that it can be a struggle, and I can see why people don't like it. And there are also some elements of it that are, you love or hate. There's a flick targeting system here where to target things you just sort of flick the joystick, and it's an odd system at first to get used to. I ended up really loving it as I got deeper into the game when I first played it. Some people just couldn't get the hang of it and really hated it. I think it's more just preference, but I really loved it and I really got into the world. And I've played a bunch of Star Wars games in the past, and to me, as you got really far into this game and you develop your powers, I felt more like a badass Jedi with Force powers in this than I have in any Star Wars game. It's really, if you've played this before through to the end, you kind of know what I'm talking about, but yeah, it feels like it's such an incredibly fun game to play. It's so exciting, and I got really invested in the world and the characters, and I just wanted to see more. I wanted to see it finished, and even if there's just like books, the sequels, I just want the end of that story. I want the rest of that story. This, to me, is such a wonderful game. It's marred with technical issues. Absolutely, I'll admit that if you really think if that's going to be a game-breaking experience for you, don't even bother. There's so many problems with this game, but overall, I mean, give it a shot if you think you can make it through that, because to me the experience is well worth it. I absolutely love this game. It's such an emotional experience every time I played it. There's one, I won't give anything away, but there's even a part fairly early on in the game that almost had me crying the first time I played it because I was so invested in it. But yeah, Advent Rising, it's such a beautiful game that was the beginning to what could have been an amazing franchise, but there are just too many missteps taken at the time. It was I think mostly a case of a company biting off way more than they could chew. It was more than the company could handle when they were Majesco, when they were going to production. I really think that yeah, this could have been the success of Mass Effect on the original Xbox, like long before we got that trilogy on the Xbox 360, PS3 generation, if it had been handled better, or with a company that really could have handled the scope of this project. But for what it is, it's an unfulfilled vision, but it's an incredible vision. Number 47, the first Yakuza on the PS2, and it's interesting playing this one now with Mark Hamill in here, and the English voice cast isn't odd now, having played some of the other ones and going back to it. But I loved this. I loved the storyline, and I really loved the kind of over-the-top Yakuza gangster stories. I love movies like that, and be able to play through this, and I love the fantastic sort of beat-em-up gameplay, and so much of the way you also get involved in little mini games and little side missions and stuff like that. A lot of it felt like, in a way, almost Shenmue 1 and 2 with a completely different tone and a completely different style to it, but there were so many day-in-the-life sort of activities and elements that reminded me of that a little bit, and I really enjoyed getting that so many years after, thinking that Shenmue 3 was never going to come out. It's like, alright, it's still very different in its style and messaging, but it has enough of a similarity that that's actually what got me involved in it. And it has a fantastic storyline if you like stuff like that. It's kind of like a Japanese Godfather type storyline thing, which I think got even better when you got to my next one here, Yakuza 2, which is still my favorite in the series. I don't know what it is. There's something about this one. Something about the story in this one just captivated me more than any other game in the series, and I just, oh man, this was just amazing. When I put this in, I'm like, alright, I really hope this sequel lives up to the first one. And it surpassed it in every respect in my mind. I love the story, I love the locales. I think it was a bigger and better game in every way. It's definitely just an incredible series. Number 45 on the PlayStation 2 is Crash Nitro Kart, the second of the Crash racing games out of the three. The third one was much lower on my list. I didn't like some of the changes, but it was still on here. The second one, all the way up here and in the top 50. Just a remarkable game. In many ways, it's kind of Crash Team Racing Plus. A lot of people saw that as a bit of a negative when this first came out. A lot of the stages are just redone versions of stages from CTR. It feels like it's just sort of a rehash in a way, but they created it's a redone version of something that's nearly perfect, and to me is one of the best multiplayer experiences ever. And it's just bigger and better in some ways. Some of the changes weren't quite as good, but overall it's just kind of like the way SSX and SSX Tricky are, if you've seen that before. SSX Tricky is kind of like SSX souped up and awesome. Crash Nitro Kart in many ways is like that. I absolutely loved it. I was uncertain going into it since it was not a Naughty Dog game, and that Crash games have been hit or miss since they left that series. But this one was just remarkable. I absolutely love this. One of the best racing games I've ever played. Still to this day, it's just such an incredible experience. Next is a trilogy in spots 44, 43, and 42. We have dun 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 da 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 dun 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 da 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 da. That's the theme song to Arc the Lads, if you don't know what I'm humming here. Otherwise you're just like, what is this guy doing? He's crazy. But yeah, this is the beautiful box set. I absolutely love everything that's in here. This is incredible. This is a remarkable RPG series. The two on the PlayStation 2 didn't make this list. They would be somewhere probably in the 300 to 400s. They were okay. I mean, End of Darkness was not okay, but the first one on the PS2 was okay. But these were incredible, and it's so sad we didn't get them initially, because the first Arc the Lad was a very early. It might have even been the first RPG in Japan on the PS1, and then Arc the Lad 2 and 3, and we didn't get them until the very early 2000s. And a big old box set of the Arc the Lad trilogy here, and the Monster Tournament extra little game here, and there's so much of these. Are fantastic strategy RPG series, and easily my favorite of that genre on a console. They're remarkable. It's kind of a bit like Shining Force in a way. You can kind of see the similarities there for the gameplay style. They are absolutely remarkable. I really love them. I love the soundtrack to them. I really got invested in the story, and I've never had so much fun with a strategy RPG on a console. They're just unbelievable. My least favorite of the three is Arc the Lad 3. I think it wasn't quite as strong story-wise, and it felt like there was more to do, I believe, in Arc the Lad 3 overall. I think I spent the most time probably with it, just doing side missions and that type of stuff, but it didn't feel quite as meaty of a game in the narrative respect, and wasn't quite as fun to play. Arc the Lad 1 would then be my second favorite, and where Arc the Lad 1 falls short is that it is a very short game. It's very, very short, especially for an RPG, and that's story-wise it's much better than 3, but I think as far as the content, not just the amount, but it's just the amount of fun you have playing through it, doesn't quite live up to it. The one that's the perfect kind of in the middle is Arc the Lad 2, which is what the anime series is mostly based off of. That to me is an incredible story, by far the best cast of characters. It is probably the most fun to play overall. It's just the complete package. It has all the elements of 1 and 3 that were hit or miss. It has all the hits with none of the misses. Arc the Lad 2, my favorite in that series, and one of my favorite RPGs on the PS1. Number 41 is Final Fantasy V here in the Anthology collection here. This is the first way that I played that game, and I really absolutely enjoyed it, and I liked being able to go back and play it, because the first time I played it was actually after I had played Final Fantasy. I played Final Fantasy 1, 4, 6, 7, 8, and then I think I played 5 before I played 9 or anything like that. So it was pretty far into it, and going back sometimes you tend to not like quite as many of the older ones in the series as much. It tends to happen a lot. For me, this didn't at all. 5 was fantastic, and I think 5 is completely forgotten, largely because it's sandwiched between two much more popular games, 4 and 6. And you also have the issue here in North America that we didn't originally get it, but we got 4 and 6, so there's a lot of nostalgia with those two. And I think this one's lost just because it's really sandwiched in between those two releases. I think it's the time of its release that it gets forgotten, but I always found it to be such a very enjoyable game overall. And in talking about Final Fantasy 4 and 6, the one that beats it out just by a little bit, number 40 here, is Final Fantasy 4 and the Complete Collection on the PSP. I really want to play the remake on the DS. I have not had a chance to play that. I figured that might even come close to replacing this. Seems to have a really, really high praise, that version, but I really like this overall. I played Final Fantasy 4 on many different platforms. This is the one I'm going to come back to over and over again. I really like the PSP version, and this is just such a step up, I think, story-wise from 3 to 4. It's one of the biggest jumps in the series for me personally, as far as how much I got involved with enjoying the actual characters and the world. I think that that was one of the biggest narrative leaps in the series between different releases, and just a remarkable game that still holds up. I mean, this is still one of the favorites in the series for a lot of people for good reason. Next up, number 39, and this is one of the rare examples of a game that over time its placement has changed immensely. Very few of these games have moved more than a handful of spaces over time. As I started this list many years ago, just thinking about my favorite games and looking through a list every time I beat a game, where am I going to place it? Does it make the top 200? That type of thing. This is one of the very few that has moved I think up almost 70 spots. I mean, just such an incredible movement because my opinion of it has changed so much over the years. Number 39, Xenosaga Episode 2. And this is one of those ones where I kind of have to reveal that the other two are higher on this list. They are somewhere up here. So, you know, revealing that a little bit just in talking about my history with this game. I loved Xenogears, and when Xenosaga first came out, Episode 1, Gears was my favorite game of all time, so I was very excited. I loved Episode 1. Episode 2 came out, and when this first hit and I first played this, I hated this game. To me, this was the most disappointing sequel I'd ever played in my entire life, and it actually took me years, I mean many years, even owning a copy of Xenosaga Episode 3 before I ever played it, because I hated this so much that I was just afraid it was just going to be the same thing over again. And finally, after a long time, I went and I replayed this a second time, and I went ahead and played Xenosaga Episode 3, finally finishing the trilogy, and now my opinions are not quite as strongly negative about this. There are elements of it that keep it so much lower. I mean, you'll see in the next video when I do my top 25, they're somewhere in that top 25, Episode 1 and 3, and this is a lot lower for good reason. A lot of the changes that they made from 1 to 2 just didn't click with me at all. I mean, sometimes you can't help things like losing certain voice actors. That happens, but I think that you can sometimes change it up and you get used to the new voice over time. This didn't work with me. That some of the voice actors they lost in here, the replacements just didn't live up to the originals. The new character designs, I really disliked them in 2. I mean, I'll talk about 3 later on, obviously, but in 2, the changes were awful. I actually think it looked worse than Episode 1, significantly worse. I didn't like some of the changes to Shion's character. I really liked in Episode 1, and she just kind of got annoying. I didn't really like her in Episode 2. There's so many problems with this. I detested the new combat mechanic in here. The new battle system in 2, I hated. There's no real shops and items and that type of thing. Like, it felt like it was so much from Episode 1 that made it incredible was just taken away. It was distilled out of it, and so much crap was put in that is infinitely inferior. And so many weird little technical issues, like when a battle would load and slowly load you and your enemies in, and it just seemed to take forever. All the battles seemed to take forever. That, you know, plus the new battle system, which I detested. I still hate it today. I still think it's absolute garbage. There's so much that I didn't like about this game that it really upset me, and so much I don't like about this game. But this is a game that is number 39 as my favorites of all time. How did it get there with all these negatives? The one thing that has always been great about this game, and that in playing it through a second time a few years ago now, that really still stuck with me, is the overall story is still incredible. Even the first time I played it, it was a pain to play. I didn't like playing it, but the story is what kept me playing it that first time, because I was still so much in love with that, as much as Episode 1. I absolutely love the story in this, and to me, that's the most important element of a game in many ways, is the story, especially a very story-heavy RPG trilogy like this. This was still an amazing sci-fi epic, and I love that aspect of it, and the story alone is could by itself give it a spot in what's one of my favorite games ever, even with all the different gameplay issues. But there are a few other things in here that I do like, that I like more as time has gone on. Things like, I do like how the eggs, the mechs and things play a much greater role in this than they did in Episode 1, and some other little things like that over time that, having played through twice, I like more than I did the first time. I appreciate more than I did the first time, because I was just so negative. I had just such powerful negative emotions regarding this game when I first played it, that even things that I really like and appreciate about the game now, I just couldn't like and appreciate at the time. I had this mental wall where I was just so into hating everything about this game but the story. So yeah, much lower than the other two in the series, only because of there's still parts of it that changes from 1 to 2 that I detest, and I think this is by far the weakest in the trilogy. But there are aspects of this that are truly some of my favorite experiences in gaming as a whole. I mean, one of the greatest stories ever, and there are some gameplay elements that I like now. So it's one that has moved a lot over time as I've reevaluated it, and I've really come to enjoy it over the years. It's still one that, you know, if go and replay the trilogy, it's going to be hard for me to decide whether or not I even go back and bother to play it a third time, but I probably will, just because of the elements that I love and to keep it as a complete trilogy. So a very more of a mixed experience, I think, than any other game ever, on one that has really moved up the ranks over the years, having re-experienced it and being really mentally in a new place in reevaluating it. Number 38 is Myth: The Fallen Lords, and number 37 is Myth 2: Soul Blighter. These were remarkable, and again show my love of pre-Halo Bungie being this high, you know, up in the 30s now of my favorite games of all time. These were incredible. I loved the aesthetic of these, and the way the story was presented is almost like a journal, and it felt like an amazing dark fantasy epic that just, the world they created, the storyline they created, the mythology that was created in here, I could invest myself in that just by itself. These two by themselves could have been just remarkable books. They were just books and not video games. The story was strong enough that they would have been great fantasy novels, and just I absolutely loved them. Getting into the art style was fantastic. The music really stands out. The opening, the introduction to Myth 2: Soul Blighter has stuck with me so much. That Raven sitting on the bed and the dun 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 moves into the Raven's eye, and like the Myth 2: Soul Blighter comes up, and you know, Soul Blighter exploding into ravens, and just everything about these is so remarkable. I really want there to be novelizations of these two games. I would love to sit and read those again. It was that great. They would have been remarkable no matter what genre these games were, but they are fantastic real-time strategy games, and when I first played them, I adored them because of how different they were than what I was playing at the time. I was playing all these Command & Conquers, and of course all the Blizzard games, and lots of different games like Battle Realms, and there were so many different strategy RPGs I was playing, strategy games I was playing on the PC at the time. With these, it was so different. There was no, you weren't building anything, you weren't creating new units, you weren't seeking out and mining gold or anything like that. There was no, you know, resource management. It was very different. It was just sort of like, these are the units you get for this mission. You better hope they make it through. Like this is what you get. And you know, it made it so much more challenging and so different. And the idea that certain if you had, say, a Dwarven character who was in one mission, you had a Dwarven character in multiple missions, over time, that character would actually kind of level up and come with you through missions, and you felt so much more connected to your units. They weren't just random grunts. They weren't just, you know, random peasants or creatures that you were creating. They weren't just a number. They were characters in a way, and you cared about them, and you really were more careful with your strategies, and even just little things that were so entertaining about the doors, they were throwing satchels and things, and the thrall blowing up and exploding everywhere and setting mines and different stuff like that. It was so creative, some of the way the maps were made, and some of the missions were just so much fun and so challenging and complicated in such a different manner than I was used to. And again, the world and the story that they made, it was amazing. I can't believe, like, that was to me, this was the biggest casualty of Bungie becoming kind of just a Halo company owned by Microsoft, and all that Bungie magic was lost. Was they had created something incredible long before Halo, and to me, these are the two greatest things that company has ever produced. Just a remarkable game. And sticking with that genre, number 36, Warcraft II. I had said before in an earlier video, the original Warcraft Orcs and Humans I really enjoyed. One of the first games I bought with my own money. Warcraft II came out and blew it out of the water in absolutely every respect. It's amazing. There are even some elements of it as far as the naval combat and things like that I like better in that than anything that is in Warcraft 3 or the Frozen Throne. I think that was even done better. And this one too, it became so much more expansive. The difference between Orcs and Humans and Warcraft 2, and then eventually getting expansions that, you know, it was crazy how much better it was. And it was almost one where it kind of was hard for me at first to go back and play Orcs and Humans the first time I went back and replayed it, because Warcraft 2 was so much better. This was so much fun. The amount of time I've invested in this over the years. I've even played, I have the Sega Saturn version, which is infinitely inferior, but the core game is so fun, it didn't even matter. It's still fun to play that version, but the original PC version, I originally played it on my Mac, at home, which is an incredible experience and something that I shared amongst most of my friends. We were all playing that absolutely to death, like constantly, staying up late at night, Saturday nights. You know, I remember a couple of times coming downstairs and playing with the sound off for hours, not to wake my parents, and like staying up really late at night past my bedtime playing that. And I have so many fond memories of Warcraft II. It's a game that I can easily put back in and play. Number 35, the series that just kept getting better with every iteration, Warcraft III, and in its expansion. I have the battle chest here. When it first came out, I actually did have the big limited edition of Warcraft III, Reign of Chaos, with the art book and the cutscene DVD and things like that. I had that massive thing back in the day, and again, one of those things is long gone, the foolishness of youth. But when I put that in and started playing it, and that first introduction sequence came in, I was just just amazing. I was like, holy cow, this is, did they really do it again? Did they really make a leap in quality again? And in my opinion, they did. I loved Warcraft III. Every aspect of it, I think, was just so much more engrossing story-wise, because too, then you had the hero units, and it felt like there were some minor RPG elements with those units that really kept you invested in the characters more. Like, I still remember and love a lot of the characters from Warcraft II, but again, they were just kind of special units in a way. They weren't as much of a character outside of just the narrative structure. And when you're actually physically playing, there was kind of cool special units. Here I felt like there were more characters and got me more involved in the world, and to me it's my favorite story overall. Frozen Throne is probably my favorite Warcraft iteration at all, that expansion set. I really had a lot of fun with that, and over the years, if I go back to a Warcraft, more often than not, it's going to be 3. It's still sitting there installed on our desktop. You know, we don't do a whole lot of PC gaming these days, but there are a handful of games still installed on the desktop that I use for work, for videos and whatever, and that's one of them. I just will put it on every once in a while and play, you know, a few just random matches. And Warcraft 3 was such a remarkable game, and the Frozen Throne expansion is special for another reason, because as time moved on and PC gaming changed in many ways, and you get so much more into DRM and so much more into things like Steam and just having digital games on PC, over time I kind of fell out of love with PC gaming, and that's it's been good in a way, because I've been able to go back and play games from older consoles that I missed over the years, and entire consoles that some which didn't even have a game on this list in the top 200 that I've been able to go back and re-experience because I haven't been spending time on the PC. The Frozen Throne expansion to Warcraft 3 is actually the last PC game I ever purchased, as far as being as far as its release date. I've purchased some older PC games since then, but as far as its release date, the newest PC game that I've ever purchased is the expansion to Warcraft 3, which is now, I don't even remember what year that came out. Was it 2003 or 4? Or I just know it's been like well over a decade since I purchased a PC game, so that really shows the change in my gaming habits. I started playing the PC less and less as I got more into the PlayStation and things like that, and as time went on, I just kind of stopped. Yeah, so that's kind of the end of my PC gaming knowledge in a way, and my experiences. But yeah, Warcraft 3, just an incredible entry, and I never got into World of Warcraft because I don't play online games at all. I don't really, you know, the only thing I ever played was the original EverQuest. But yeah, never got into that, and I feel like at this point we're never going to see a true Warcraft 4, so it's kind of the end of a great franchise in many ways for me. But number 34, I actually like one Blizzard franchise a little bit more, Starcraft. The original Starcraft and its expansion Brood War, those, I am a sci-fi nut. So if it was just equal to Warcraft 2 when this had come out, just equal to it, the fact that it had a sci-fi setting would have made me like it a little bit more than Warcraft 2's fantasy setting. That alone, but it was more than equal. It was infinitely better, and just the remarkable balance in that first game is, I think, in many ways still unsurpassed to this day. I mean, no matter what race you play, it's totally a totally different experience, but at the same time, you never feel like any match is completely outmatched or misaligned. Everything just feels perfectly balanced and wonderful, and it still looks fantastic. It is such an amazing soundtrack, and in a game like this, where StarCraft, where certain missions and certain matches against people can sometimes last hours and hours. You have some that you can blaze through in 15 minutes, but then you have some that you're really playing for hours, and it's very important to have a really quality soundtrack that's not intrusive. It's not something that's just has great emotional rises and falls that don't fit with the action that's happening on screen, and it can't be too loud and bombastic. It just has to be very atmospheric, but also has to be memorable and enjoyable. And as far as these games of this type and genre are, that's my favorite music ever, is the original Starcraft, and I just have so much fun with that game. And it's the one I probably play the most still on my PC. It's probably my most played game on my PC today. It's just one that, it's not my absolute favorite PC game ever. There's just a couple more that I like just a tiny bit more than this, but it's easily my most played just because for some reason it still today holds my interest and still has that just kind of pick up and play fun that I think a lot of other games, I feel like it's too much of a time investment and I have to play through the whole game again. This is just, I can just put it on and just play for an hour or two, and it's still to this day just as fun as it was back in the 90s playing it again. This is one of the last games I played on my Mac, and just an absolutely remarkable experience that in many ways has not been equaled. Now for spots 33 and 32, I have to mention them together because it's a sequel and the original game, and these are actually my favorite PC games of all time. There are no more PC games after this mark. These are my favorite games on the PC, and they are still so incredibly unique and just remarkable games. Dungeon Keeper 2, and then right above it, the original Dungeon Keeper. As far as a game where you play the bad guy and that type of thing, when it comes to a real-time strategy game, this is by far, I think, the most creative game, and two games ever created for me personally. I absolutely adore them. Just, they're incredible. I love mining through your own dungeons and creating everything. Just, it's the way you interact with creatures, and it has such a brilliant, dark sense of humor that I absolutely adore. It's one where it just comes across so beautifully, just in the writing and the presentation of it, and it's so much fun to play. It's absolutely remarkable. It's a game that I feel does not have quite the following anymore that I feel like it should have, and it's always so sad that we never got Dungeon Keeper 3, and you were supposed to have Dungeon Keeper 3, we also went to the surface and things like that, and the series got cut short. And Dungeon Keeper 2, though, fantastic, but that's the original Dungeon Keeper and the Dungeon Keeper Gold version of Dungeon Keeper. That is my favorite PC game ever. Absolutely just remarkable. I love those games, and the first time I ever played them was at my friend Zach's house. We were playing EverQuest one night, and I forget why, but for some reason we couldn't get online at all and just kind of gave up, and he pulled out the first Dungeon Keeper, and he hadn't played it before. I think it was his brother Nick's game technically, and I hadn't played it. We put in Dungeon Keeper, and it was just, that was one of the defining experiences for me on the PC of like, just wow, I really think I'm gonna like this game, and I've got my own copy. And that was the game that, you know, on school nights sometimes I was kind of tired for a little while because I just played that all night long. The original Dungeon Keeper, my favorite PC game of all time. At number 31, we get another RPG on the list here because, of course, every once in a while, you know, it's been a while since we've had an RPG here, so we gotta have another one coming up here. My favorite Tales game of all time, Tales of the Abyss, and I cannot describe how much I love this game. And I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. I was expecting to enjoy it because before that I enjoyed some of the older Tales games, and I was coming off just playing Legendia for the first time ever. I'd played Symphonia before that, and I was expecting to enjoy this. I was not expecting to be so engrossed in the character development and just the overall storyline as I was. And to me, this is the only Tales game that, in my opinion, the characters and the narrative are an easy equal to most Final Fantasies. As far as, you know, the Final Fantasy series, I tend to like a bit more than the Tales series as it goes along. This is one where I would say is 100% the equal, and I think the evolution of Luke's character through this game is still one of the greatest examples of a change in a character done correctly. It feels realistic, it feels heartfelt, it really feels natural, it doesn't feel forced, and it flows so beautifully. And the way the change in his character and his journey affects everyone around him, and the changes in themselves, and the revealing of those characters and their own personal journey is just done so masterfully that I really don't think the series before or since has really touched that level of quality and storytelling just for me and what I personally like in a game. In my experience, I've never played another game in the series that really hit those marks in such a way that it touched me to that emotional level. Just incredible. In that respect alone would earn it a really high spot on my favorite games ever, but I think it's just about up there, almost tied with Symphonia as far as the most fun to physically play as far as solving the puzzles, exploring the world, and just the combat. So for me, it's by far overall my favorite game in the Tales series, and I really don't see any of the games that have yet to play some of the newer ones. Like I have Vesperia on 360, I haven't played yet. As much as some of the newer ones look interesting to me, I just don't see anything touching this as in that series. And this is one, again, I say, as far as the narrative structure and the story and the characters all together, as from a storytelling perspective, is easily, without question, my favorite game in that series. Number 30 is Bushido Blade 2, and number 29 is my favorite fighting game of all time, the original Bushido Blade. This is actually the original reason why I bought a PS1. I was happy with my PC and Mac at the time, and I was thinking about getting something like a 3DO, and I knew the N64 was coming out, and I was eyeing the Saturn, and I'm like, choosing between those, and the PlayStation wasn't really on my radar. That really wasn't one of the ones that I was considering saving up and getting or asking for Christmas or that type of thing. But then I played this, again, this was at my friend Zach's house. He had Bushido Blade, and I forget, he had a couple other games, but this is the one that he put in, and I just kept wanting to play it. And I remember at one point he's like, can we play another game? Like, can we just keep playing this? This is great. And to me, these two together here are still some of the most fun, realistic fighting games ever created. I mean, back on the PS1, and oh my gosh, I can't believe there's not a real Bushido Blade 3. And I have played the, was it Kendo Master Bushido or whatever on PS2. It's not quite the same. I kind of liked it, but it just wasn't quite what I was wanting it to be. These are just remarkable. These are my two favorite fighting games ever by a wide margin. You see, the next closest one is like Tekken Tag Tournament. But these they're remarkable, and no fighting game before or since has been quite like these. They still feel fairly unique in both the style of combat and the overall quality of the games. I like the original one just a little bit more, but Bushido Blade 2 has so much more to it, so many more characters, so much more variety. But the original one, some of the changes to the slight changes to the gameplay, I think, I didn't like quite as much. I really think just the pure, simple structure of Bushido Blade 1 I like a little bit more. But if I was going to play through as a single-player experience, I'd replay Bushido Blade 2, I think, a little more, just because the little bit of a better storyline and more characters, and the characters have a little bit more personality to them. There's so much more going on with Bushido Blade 2, but they're remarkable, and it's the kind of game where a match can last 2 seconds or forever, seemingly. I've had so many times where I would pick like Red Shadow and a katana, and just like it would start, and within like a second, just whoosh, right through, kill the person. But sometimes where you go through and they end up blocking it, and you have two evenly matched people, and you just keep going, seemingly forever. You just can't seem to kill each other. It's one of those games where you never know what you're going to get into, and it's endlessly fun. And if someone who's never experienced the PS1 and they really don't think they're going to enjoy some older fighting games, I would pull one of these out immediately, and every time I've done that, they ended up falling in love with it. I remember my kid brother Eric playing these, going back, you know, he's younger enough to where he grew up more with the 360 and stuff. He played the heck out of the Bushido Blade games. He brought them out for a friend one time. They ended up playing them for hours, and they're just incredible games, and I don't think I'll ever touch a fighting game that comes close to Bushido Blade 1 and 2. Alright everybody, only 3 left to go in this video, and then we get into the top 25 next time. We have here on 28, SSX, another one of those games that I rented for the PS2 back in the day for that glorious weekend of my life, and played the heck out of this. I liked the Cool Borders series before this on PS1. This blew those out of the water, though. This was just unbelievable. I'd never played anything like this. It was kind of like the equivalent of what the first 2 Tony Hawk games were for skateboarding. This was for snowboarding. I loved every second of this. Again, it's still one of my most played games. Just a remarkable experience, and I just don't think that any snowboarding game, any kind of sports game ever has surpassed it, with one exception. We very quickly after that got SSX Tricky, which was basically just SSX perfected. It took SSX, made everything better, gave it more character, more attitude. The stages that were from the original game were redone and just made bigger and better in every capacity, and more exciting and just mind-blowing, and then added a few new stages and things, and just everything about SSX Tricky. This is one of the very, very few games that I would objectively give a 10 out of 10. And that's saying a lot. There are very few games that I love, I would not give a 10 out of 10. SSX Tricky is incredible. It's actually my second favorite multiplayer game ever released. I will still play this constantly. Doesn't matter what version, the Xbox, you know, the GameCube, PS2. The PS2 one's my favorite, absolutely. That's the one I had for the longest time, and just this to me is absolute perfect game and so much fun. There's only one multiplayer game that I like a little bit more than that. The last one on here, another one of these. I wish I had my original copy because I have so many memories with it. Crash Team Racing on the PS1. This is my favorite multiplayer game of all time, still is to this day. Super high on this list, number 26, my 26th favorite game ever created. As far as multiplayer games and playing games with friends, and I will play that still today more than any game. Any modern game, any old game, it doesn't matter. The original Crash Team Racing on the PS1, my favorite multiplayer experience to this day. Even just going through, I will go through the single player every once in a while just for fun on like a Saturday afternoon every once in a while. Every couple of years I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll bring it out all the time to play with friends. This will always be my go-to multiplayer game, no matter what. My go-to kind of 4-player party game, doesn't matter what it is. It's without question, my favorite kart racing game ever, my favorite multiplayer game. It is absolutely incredible, and I have never had as much fun just playing games with my siblings as with Crash Team Racing. You know, we played a lot of games separately mostly. We didn't play very many games together growing up just because the difference in taste and difference in ages between myself and my siblings, and there being just about a decade between myself and my brother. We would play a lot of single player stuff separately, but we'd play stuff like the Mario 1 and 3 together. We'd wake up Christmas morning though. Just every Christmas morning it was a tradition to wake up until my parents got up and play Crash Team Racing. That was a tradition for as long as I can remember. As long as we've had that game, that's what we played. And my sister and I, and then my brother was old enough, he started playing it, and it's just something that has never left me. It is easily my favorite multiplayer game. Crash Team Racing, my 26th favorite game of all time. So I'm guessing you have a pretty good idea that it's almost pretty much RPGs, the top 25 in this next video. So if you don't really care about RPGs, you might not like my top 25. But so in this one we had my favorite PC game of all time, my favorite multiplayer game of all time. So there's a couple games in here that were very kind of mixed experiences, and it really shows that even if a game is very flawed, I think if there's a certain element that touches you on a very personal level and a very emotional level, you can really love an imperfect game, and sometimes those imperfections just kind of add to the memory of the experience. So we are done now with this video, and come back next time for my top 25.